Hi there. It's the middle of the week as I'm recording this. It's April 16th, the day after the 15th, which is when you're supposed to pay your taxes. Did you do that? I did it. It wasn't fun. I'm so grateful to have you here, and I wouldn't be able to pay my taxes without you. So thank you to everybody who subscribes to the show with a paid subscription. That's how I paid my taxes. So really grateful to you. Yesterday, a listener named Claire sent me a message that said the show is indispensable and listens to it every day. Very much appreciated, Claire, and everybody else who sends those kind of messages. Gives me purpose, gives me a reason to get up in the morning and to work on this show all day long, and I am so happy that you appreciate it. Put a lot into it. I've got Eric Segall joining me today, good friend of mine, great friend to the show for as long as anybody else has been a friend of the show, constitutional law scholar at Georgia State University. We had a really interesting and informative conversation. I asked him pretty great questions today, I gotta say, because there's so much to talk about in terms of the courts, the Supreme Court, and what they are doing to push back or not. And I thought it was a really good one. So if you want to listen to that, you want to fast forward, as we used to say, jump to it, my conversation with Professor Segall begins at 41 minutes on today's episode. But every day here on the program, the podcast, the StandUp with Pete Dominick show, I do clips and headlines. I gather all kinds of headlines from a wide range of sources, as well as audio clips, and I share all of that with you so that you really, I think I cover it pretty good. That's what people say. That's what the people are saying. So that you don't have to go and look at the news all day. You can hopefully stop here in the morning and maybe somewhere else in the afternoon or evening again and get on with your life and do good things with your hands, as Vicky says. Our friend Vicky, the immortal queen, as our other friend Karen called her yesterday in a text chat, is doing okay. She announced she had to get a routine colonoscopy. She said it. She said it right there at the Hangout, so now I'm saying it at the podcast. But we love her so much. She was worried about the anesthesia. She's had a problem in the past, and so she's good. And I wanted to announce that because we love you, Vicky, and we're happy that you're good and that you're all cleaned out. I'm teasing. All right. Well, I've got lots to get to, so let's do it. Yesterday was a hell of a day. It seemed like a lot of media outlets and a lot of news resources were focused on the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has disappeared for reasons that a judge is now demanding that the Trump administration get to. I think it's a pretty big news yesterday that there was a hearing, a whole bunch of protesters outside this hearing in a U.S. district court, where lawyers from the administration have apparently acted in contempt of that court. The judge, which ordered the administration facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the U.S., as well as give updates on what they are doing to make that happen, but they haven't done it. The Judge Zenas is her name, Judge Paula Zenas, hope she's got a lot of security, said what the record shows is nothing has been done. And then she dismissed the administration lawyer's argument that the Oval Office meeting between Trump and the president of El Salvador was part of the effort to, quote, facilitate the case, which is what the Supreme Court and her court said that they had to do. So news overnight, the federal judge overseeing the case of the man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador said she would allow for an expedited fact-finding to help her figure out whether the Trump administration is complying with their order that it facilitate his return from one of the country's notorious mega prisons. These horrible, horrible prisons. The judge said, I do need evidence in this regard because to date what the record shows is nothing has been done. Said she was unsatisfied with the sworn statements she's been getting each day from Trump administration officials detailing what the government has been doing to carry out her directive. She wants discovery, she told the Justice Department attorney, which is a pretty big deal because now they're going to have to say all these things that you're hearing the Trump administration, people like Stephen Miller say in the Oval Office or on Fox News and other supporters of Trump on other networks and other places. All those things. Now you can say whatever you want to a reporter, but now they have to do it under oath. The judge said some of the discovery could come in the form of depositions taken by attorneys for Kilmar, Abrego Garcia, the administration officials who've been submitting these daily sworn statements. The judge appeared to be visibly frustrated, according to reporters at CNN, with how the case has unfolded since last week when it landed back in her court after the Supreme Court largely endorsed her order that the administration worked to bring Abrego Garcia back. Writing in her daily newsletter that I've been quoting every day, Heather Cox Richardson said that we all know what's going on, but it's impossible right now to know which individual is responsible for stonewalling this court. For that matter, those speaking for the administration usually deny personal knowledge of the case, simply saying they've been made aware of the facts that they're representing. But the judge, who, like I said, called for 2 weeks of fact-finding to determine if Trump regime is following her orders that it facilitate his return, the judge told Abrego Garcia's lawyers that they may conduct 4 depositions and apply for 2 more, which make up to 15 document requests and up to 15 interrogatories, which are lists of questions, written questions that must be answered under oath and in writing. So this judge has not given up. This is, I think, a pretty big deal and a pretty big development. And while it seems that it is still looking good for Trump in terms of support he's getting from his own supporters on this, the rest of the country and the world seems pretty horrified and pretty angry that he has done this. And I'm just going to go out on a limb. I haven't seen really anybody else saying this. Most people are saying he's never coming back. We're never going to see him again. I don't know. I just feel like it's possible, and it's not my optimism, it's political calculations. Like, at some point, this is going to become too much for the Trump administration. No, I'm just an idiot for saying this. I don't know. Also, I just feel like all of the attention being paid to this one man who's been disappeared, and so many others have as well, but specifically to this guy because of his specific cases and circumstances and the fact that he's done nothing wrong, apparently. The idea that Trump wants to do this with American citizens, I just don't think that that's going to go over well. It hasn't, and I think people are going to continue to rightly focus and protest as a result, because obviously people are terrified of this idea. And so that's the big story yesterday. And I wanted to just open with that. Of course, the senator from Maryland who represents Abrego Garcia, or he's one of his constituents, can't vote, I don't think, Garcia, but he's gone to El Salvador today. I believe he's going to El Salvador to meet with Abrego Garcia, or at least to try to. So we'll get a lot more information when the senator, Chris Van Hollen, comes back. If he comes back, maybe they'll just put him in. Maybe the senator won't come back. We'll just see him getting his head shaved and then sitting back to back centipede style with other prisoners. And you were like, is that Senator Van Hollen right there? No, I don't think that'll happen, actually. So we'll learn a lot more after Van Hollen comes back. But I think that's when you ask what Congress and what senators are doing, this is something. This is a good thing. So we'll continue to follow. I'll continue to follow that story. I'm sure you are. We'll continue to talk about it at our Hangouts and on Discord and share information. And obviously, going to have a whole bunch of audio clips coming up for it. A lot of people focused on it in the last 24 hours. But there is other news. And the other big story yesterday was Harvard stood up to Trump. Well, they have a $52 billion endowment. How long can they last? We will see. Trump wants Harvard to apologize to the White House, but I don't think that's going to happen. And has Harvard's pushback against the administration, or the regime, as Heather Cox Richardson calls it, embolden more U.S. resistance? That's the big question that I think is a good question a lot of people are asking. A lot of people. In a letter noting that the administration's demands undercut the First Amendment and universities' legal rights, Harvard lawyers wrote, "The university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. Neither Harvard nor any other private university can allow itself to be taken over by the federal government. Accordingly, Harvard will not accept the government's terms as an agreement in principle. Harvard is not prepared to agree to demands that go beyond the lawful authority of this or any administration." Harvard did not stop there. It turned its website into a defense of the medical research funded by the federal grants Trump is threatening to withhold. They explain that advances Harvard researchers have made in cancer research, heart disease, neurodegenerative diseases, obesity, and diabetes, infectious diseases, and organs and transplantation. It highlights the researchers, shows labs, and presents readable essays on different scientific breakthroughs. So that's a pretty smart tactic as well. Harvard's President Alan Garber says freedom of thought and inquiry, along with the government's long-standing commitment to respect and protect it, has enabled universities to contribute in vital ways to a free society, to a healthier, more prosperous lives for people everywhere. All of us share a stake in safeguarding that freedom. We proceed now, as always, with the conviction that the fearless and unfettered pursuit of truth liberates humanity, and with faith in the enduring promise that America's colleges and universities hold for our country and our world. There you go. That is the other big story from yesterday. It will be really interesting to see how other universities respond. They aren't all Harvard with that endowment, and so the best thing they can do is try to remain in solidarity, and it looks like they are. I just saw this report. A group of universities, including Brown University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and education groups, filed a lawsuit yesterday seeking to halt the Department of Energy's cuts to federal research grants. So they are fighting back. We'll see what happens, but certainly following that whole story closely, what happens with these colleges and universities and whether or not they bend the knee, the pressure's being put on them. Very, very tough. There is other news. There are other headlines, and I want to give it to you as I see it, as I've read it, as I've heard of it. I thought this is interesting from Reuters. One of the U.S. Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, he's a great guy. By the way, I was talking to my daughters about how great of a guy he is. What an unqualified asshole. I mean, his own mother hated him for a period of time at least. Anyway, all of his wives, 3 wives? I don't know. Anyway, this case is just a real POS. So he's got this guy who was one of his top advisors named Dan Caldwell. He was escorted from the Pentagon yesterday after being identified during an investigation into leaks at the Department of Defense. Caldwell was placed on administrative leave for an unauthorized disclosure. So that'll be really interesting. This decision had not been previously reported, but this guy leaked. He was one of Hegseth's leading advisors, and now he's been caught, escorted him out. Thought it was interesting. Washington Post is reporting DOJ is collecting federal data to remove immigrants from housing and jobs. Officials are working with the U.S. DOJ service. They're pushing agencies to turn over information where people work, study, and live. Reports like these are becoming increasingly familiar. The Trump regime is using personal data normally protected from dissemination to find undocumented immigrants wherever they are, often with the goal of removing them from their housing and the workforce. It is brutal and inhumane, and I think inefficient. It's going to work for some, but I just can't imagine that it's going to be a critical mass. We'll see. It's horrible. In a report that contradicts the Health and Human Services Secretary, who, believe it or not, his name is RFK Jr., the CDC is saying that the autism rate rose. 1 in 31 8-year-olds had autism in the U.S. communities examined by the CDC, a small increase from previous years, according to this report that was released. But don't worry, RFK is going to get to the bottom of it and find out what the reason is. So everything's going to be fine. Yesterday, the State Department, the Trump regime, has expanded the power of advisor Elon Musk's government cutting team over the State Department, making a lieutenant of Elon Musk's acting head of foreign assistance. Senior U.S. official confirmed the new job for this guy who's an associate of DOJ, earlier appointed to help finish dismantling the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is just a continually horrifying story. Another news item that seems likely to get the attention of the White House: China's decision to retaliate against Trump's sharp increase in tariffs by ordering restrictions on the exports of a wide range of critical minerals and magnets is a warning shot across the bow of American national security, industry, and defense experts. They're being very specific with who they are targeting, including beef cattle ranchers. So they are now getting their beef from Australia instead of America, which is going to be billions and billions of dollars lost. So what are you going to do about that for American beef farmers? That's going to be a big story, of course. The man accused of setting fire to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence allegedly told 911 operators that he targeted the governor in part because of his views on the war in Gaza, according to a search warrant obtained by one news site in Pennsylvania. The warrant said that the man called 911 early Sunday morning after a fire at the governor's residence, said Shapiro needs to know he will not take part in his plans for what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. So was that anti-Semitic or was it just pro-Palestinian? I don't know, but this guy is obviously got some serious issues. I think it's fair to say he's faced personal and financial turmoil in recent years, including allegations that he assaulted his wife and young children amid a suicide attempt. Investigators say that mental health issues may be a factor, according to a source familiar with the investigation. All right, well, those are all the news stories that I've got. I'm sure there are more, and I'm always happy to read things that you send me. Send them over, standupwithpete@gmail.com. But now it's time to get to the audio that I've got for you, the clip show. You know, some people have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers just doing clip shows on YouTube. That's all they do. They go through clips, and they talk about them, and they get huge followings, and I don't want to do that. One part of this daily show is I go through and play a few clips with very little commentary, just in case you haven't noticed. And the big part of the show, the important part, the original part, is my conversations with the smartest people I can find. Coming up today, of course, Eric Segall, but I do that every day. So people love the clip show. They love them on YouTube. I think it's helpful to get a wide range of sound or videos from the last 24 hours and more, and that's why I do it, and I work hard to aggregate these and edit them and put them up for you. So let's do it right now. And I can't do any of it without your paid subscription. See, I don't have ads, annoying ads. I don't sell shit I don't believe in, but I do have to ask you to pay. And if you can, pay more if you get more out of it. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Clip show time. All right, let's start with one of the most viral clips, most seen clips from yesterday. This is Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife outside the courthouse yesterday. There was a huge protest, and we finally heard from her in her own words, and here is what it sounded like.
Of after his disappearance, and I stand before you filled with spirit that refuses to bring down. I will not stop fighting until I see my husband alive. Kilmar, if you can hear me, stay strong. God hasn't forgotten about you. Our children are asking, when would you come home? And I pray for the day I tell them the time and date that you'll return. As we continue through Holy Week, my heart aches for my husband, who should have been here leading our Easter prayers. Instead, I find myself pleading with the Trump administration and the Bukele administration to stop playing political games with the life of Kilmar. Our family is torn apart during this scary time, and our children miss their dad so much. Despite the challenges we continue to face with the U.S. and the Salvadorian government, I hope that the strength of faith and the resilience within us will keep us standing after all the punches we continue to receive. Our ability to fight back against these governments are testimonies to the spirit of fight and restraint that God has given us. We will continue standing strong, and we will never give up on you, Kilmar.
All right. Wow. Very dramatic, indeed. And now let's head over to CNN, where Kate Baldwin had Senator Chris Van Hollen, one of the senators from Maryland, on. And like I said, he's on his way or will be in El Salvador today. That's going to be a big story. Often with the goal room is Van Hollen.
The Salvadoran ambassador to the United States, this in part. I have met with Mr. Abrego Garcia's wife, mother, and brother, and as you can imagine, they are extremely worried about his health, safety, and continued illegal confinement, as am I. And joining us now is Senator Van Hollen. Senator, thank you for your time. You requested this meeting with President Bukele while he's in D.C. Is the meeting set? Have you heard back?
Kate, it's good to be with you. I did request it. I've not heard back from the president of El Salvador. And as I said in that letter, if I don't hear from him and Abrego Garcia is not quickly returned, I do intend to go to El Salvador this week to show solidarity with his family. As you indicated, the Trump administration itself has admitted that he was abducted and sent to this prison in error, and he should get his due process.
They show no intent of doing anything to bring him back anytime soon, that is for sure. If by midweek, I mean, this could be tomorrow, nothing happens, you go to El Salvador, do you have a hope of leaving with him when you come back, or what can you accomplish there?
Kate, I hope to meet with officials of the government of El Salvador. I don't know if the president is going to be in country at that time. I also hope to visit this notorious prison to see Abrego Garcia, to let him know that his family and friends are very worried about him, as am I. I think that the situation for both the Trump administration and the president of El Salvador is unsustainable because the Supreme Court, as you reported, by 9-0, has said the Trump administration has to facilitate his return. And you have the president of El Salvador saying, well, I don't have the power to release him. Both things are untrue. The president could, of course, facilitate his return. After all, the United States is paying El Salvador money for this prison. And, of course, the president of El Salvador could release him. So at some point, I think this becomes unsustainable. People are going to keep calling for his release because the Trump administration itself has admitted he was wrongfully whisked out of the country, and we have a 9-0 decision from the Supreme Court.
This is very important, obviously, to you, as he and his family are constituents of yours. But I heard this somewhat debated last night. And what do you say to someone, I'm picking a random place, Idaho? Why should we, the collective we, care about this one case?
Well, we should care about this case because of due process. Every American citizen is due their due process, and people who are in the United States under legal protective status, like Abrego Garcia was, are entitled to due process. So if the president gets to shred the Constitution and ignore the Supreme Court in this case, it is a very short path to the president ignoring court orders in other cases. So every American should care about this.
Yes, every American should care about this, and a lot of us do, and are paying close attention to it. Let's stay with CNN and Kate Baldwin, because she also had Steve Vladeck on. He's now a CNN legal analyst, and he's one of the most respected con law scholars out there. And even though the audio is not great on this, so it's fine. Let's listen. His analysis.
A lot of us, at CNN and elsewhere, were saying Thursday night when the Supreme Court handed down its ruling that by switching from what Judge Zenas had done, which was say you must return him by a date and time certain, to this, wishy-washy word facilitate, the court had created exactly this wiggle room. And, Kate, maybe the Supreme Court was hoping that the Trump administration would take the hint that that decision was unanimous and would actually try to exert some pressure, diplomatic pressure, financial pressure on El Salvador to comply. I think we now know, even if we didn't last Thursday, that that's not going to happen. And so to the question of, so what's the next step in court? I don't doubt for a second is going to order the government to take more aggressive steps to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return, to put diplomatic pressure, to put economic pressure on El Salvador. If the Trump administration says, we tried and we can't, one, Kate, that's a pretty stunning concession of impotence on the part of this administration. But two, I think the other piece of this is that's going to create a lot of pressure on federal courts in every other immigration case to not let anybody be removed from the country until we're absolutely sure that all the I's have been dotted and all the T's have been crossed.
All right. Well, thought that was pretty interesting and important to share. And also this is another United States Senator. This is Chris Murphy. He's one of the best, I think, communicators, smart guy, seems to have a pretty great moral compass. I like him. I don't know about you. Here's what he had to say, and I think he posted this on Instagram.
The case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia should matter to you. This is an individual who came to the United States over 10 years ago. He was given protected status by a court, meaning that he could not be removed back to El Salvador because his life would be in jeopardy if he left. He's got American citizen children, American citizen wife. He's got a job here. Donald Trump ignored that court order and deported him. It was such a brazen violation of the law that the Supreme Court weighed in. In a rare 9-0 ruling, the Supreme Court said that Trump had to bring this individual back to the United States, but he still didn't do it. This is the constitutional crisis. It's the confrontation between the court saying that the president has to bring Abrego Garcia back home and Trump refusing to do it. And why should this matter to you? Because if the president has the power to jail, imprison, to deport anyone, even if they have a legal right to be here as a citizen or through protected status given by the courts, then none of us are safe. Today, it's this El Salvadorian immigrant, but tomorrow it could be you or me. This matters. This matters. This is the one power that we cannot give the president of the United States, the ability to take any of us off the street and imprison us just because the president believes he has the power, a power that he does not have.
All right. Well, there you go. Senator Chris Murphy with more analysis and input on it. I thought that was really good. So is this. This is Ambassador Susan Rice, always been a real smart woman. She was on some YouTube show or podcast yesterday talking about this issue.
Anybody in this country who walks the streets needs to fear a situation where the government believes it can pick you up, detain you, and deport you without due process. Because even if you're a citizen, they can claim you're not. And without due process, you don't have the opportunity to prove that you're a citizen. You don't have the opportunity to prove you're not a criminal. And so, people may think that, oh, well, these brown people who must be Venezuelan gang members and came here illegally and committed crimes, I don't mind if they get sent to El Salvador. We have no way of knowing if those people are anything other than brown people. We don't know if they're non-citizens. We don't know if they came here illegally. We don't know if they're gang members. We don't know if they've committed crimes because none of them had the opportunity to have their cases heard. And in a world where there is no due process for some, there is no due process for any of us. And we all need to wake up and understand how bloody serious this is.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, so, one person who has not woken up and understood how bloody serious this is Trump regime principal deputy press secretary, a guy named Harrison Fields. And he was on News Nation. I was happy to see the anchor there named Hannah Doba pushing back on him over his assertions that the wrongly deported Maryland man is a gang member. It's a heated exchange, and I like the way that the reporter handled this. It is enraging to hear, but I still wanted to include it after the previous clips.
Also want to correct the record. The framing, and I'm glad you talked about Rachel Morin because she hasn't gotten any coverage from the mainstream media, and her senator, Chris Van Hollen, who's sending letters about this man and had no letters to do with Rachel Morin. But the reality is this wasn't a Maryland father. This was a El Salvadorian man who was illegally in this country, who was affiliated with MS-13.
There is no evidence to that.
Let's set the record straight about who this person is.
There's no evidence that he was a gang member.
With all due respect, if the Department of Justice has come out and said that he has gang affiliations, just like the same man who killed Rachel Morin had gang affiliations. So you would have told me before Rachel Morin's death, you would have defended that man and said he had no gang affiliations, and he went on to kill Rachel Morin. So instead of defending this gentleman, talk about who he actually is, and talk about the risk in keeping illegal criminals in this country. This is exactly what President Trump was elected to do, to return these people back to their home countries, and that's what he did.
We're not defending him. I'm going to reiterate that is unsubstantiated. There is no evidence of him being a gang member. He is married to a U.S. citizen, and he was in this country legally. Okay, but we don't know if he was
Being
actually...
Being married does not make you not a gang member.
There's no evidence. We're going to move on. There's no evidence that he was a gang member, and I want to reiterate that to our viewers.
The Department of Justice came out and said there was credible evidence that he was a member or affiliated with MS-13.
You said he's a gang member, and he wasn't legally allowed to be here, which, again, he was legally allowed to be here. And he is married to an American citizen.
You can hold court for him all you want. He's no longer in this country.
All right.
The Americans are safer because of it.
And to go back to the original question, so right now the White House seems to be doing nothing about getting him back, and that's fine. I'm going to move on.
He's an illegal immigrant. He was here illegally with deportation orders in 2019. What part of that do you not understand?
I understand the story very well, and I'm going to stop going back and forth with you on this, but I will say, again, he had every right to be in this country. Is there any scenario under which
he did not. He was an illegal immigrant.
We're going to move on this.
No, I will not let you go forward.
Okay.
He was an illegal alien in this country with a deportation order in 2019. He is an El Salvadorian citizen. If you are not a citizen of the United States of America here illegally, there are grounds to deport you, in which happened recently.
Again, unsubstantiated. Those are not the facts, but I will move on.
All right. Well done by that reporter. Well done. Yeah. The way that guy's arguing is pretty familiar to me. When it comes to immigration, they always focus on some horrific murder of somebody by an undocumented person to paint all of the rest of the people here as murderers, of course. And should be mentioned that, I don't think she mentioned it there, that the cop who said that he had gang affiliations or that he was an MS-13 member was a proven liar. The guy is a liar. The cop is a liar, and was dismissed from duty because he was lying about another case. So hard to get through all of the information and all of the lies, but I think most of it's been debunked. But as I said at the beginning, they're now going to have to go on the record with this bullshit. They're going to have to say all that stuff under oath in this discovery phase with this district court judge. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. I like this young kid. He's got a huge following. His name is Luke, and he goes by It's Luke, and he's got a huge following on YouTube and Instagram and Substack, and the kind of following that really frustrated and made me angry and jealous because of the way I've been doing this for such a long time and I work so hard. The kid just sits in his car. Most of his videos are just him in his car, and he's got almost 1 million followers on YouTube and TikTok. Good for him. Just a sign that I need to do more of those, be on more of those platforms, which I wrote down after that. He inspired me to do change some of the way I'm working, this young man. And this rant is great. I give it to him. It's Luke. Let's go.
I'm going to do this once and only once because I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. I know you vote and act exclusively out of self-interest and greed, but there are those of us with souls who don't. I'm a white, straight, Christian-appearing young male citizen from a middle-class family. People who look like me have had the same rights in this fucking country for the last 250 years. And if I shut my mouth right now, I can guarantee you I'd have the same rights for another 250 years. But I'm not gonna do that. I get that you don't care that there are mass federal lowlifes grabbing people off the streets for the crime of speaking their mind. I get that you don't care that this administration has illegally disappeared someone who was here legally and committed no crime to a foreign fucking prison and then made it their policy that they just can't get it back. But I do care. These people have rights and they're losing them. And this isn't policy, it's authoritarianism with a fucking spray tan. If you think I'm not going to use every ounce of the platform that I've somehow acquired and every decibel of my voice to drag every abhorrent thing that this administration does right into the sun, you're fucking wrong. And one more thing for you fucking rat bastards. I can promise you that history will look more kindly on me than it will on you.
Yeah, there he goes. That guy and a lot of other people, their whole brand is anger, by the way. And I don't think I could do that every day. All of his videos are like that. My friend Brian Shapiro does a lot of that kind of anger stuff. It goes viral. Those clips go viral. They do. People like them. I get it. I can get that way and it's real. But I feel like it's forced when you do it all the time, most of the time. So that's hard. I have a wide range of emotions. I would like to share all of them. I'm not sure that that's going to make me the most popular guy in the world all the time. But hey, give it to him. And I also thought this was interesting. This is from years ago, but I love Bo Burnham, the comedian. He was doing a talk at the 92nd Street Y. This is 10 years old. And I feel like we need to put this on repeat just to remind ourselves that we aren't insane, that Donald Trump is a crazy person. He's insane. He's always been insane. But sometimes when so many people around you or in this country, whether you know them or not, are buying into the insanity and supportive of it, it makes you think, wait, is there something wrong with me? No, there's nothing wrong with you. Bo Burnham reminds us of this from 10 years ago. I just found this clip and I thought I would share it.
Oh, it's Donald Trump. Are we forgetting that, I'll never get over that. I'll never get over that it's Donald Trump. I'm even the people yeah, I get it, snowflakes and you don't like her and Hillary. It's Donald Trump. You're on board with Donald Trump. No, I'll take those arguments. Okay, yeah, maybe that should be less. It's Donald Trump. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Oh.
I just love the way he says that. I thought it was great. Also, speaking of comedians, this is really, really good too. Kara Swisher was taping a live episode of her podcast, and she had a very funny comedian from The Daily Show. I believe he's on The Daily Show, Josh Johnson. Yeah. And in the interview, he has this great and hilarious analogy that is just perfect. I'll let it speak for itself. The premise of the bit or the analogy is why Trump's tariffs are so manly.
I do think that it is manly in the way that, like, my dad would try to fix the sink, and he's not a plumber.
It's like me.
Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So, like, we own the tools, because you can buy tools. Yes. Don't just let anybody have the tools. They don't ask you if you're going to tear up your house at all. They'll let you buy the hammer, the screwdriver. They'll let you buy, like, the hatchet. And so then you bring it home, and in your head as a man, you're like, I have the tools. So if anything happens, I'm at least halfway there. Never mind, the other half is like knowledge. And so then there's like a leaky faucet, and so you get under the sink, you move all the Lysol, all the stuff out of the way, and then you're under there, and it's very uncomfortable. You're like, wow, I can't believe that there are people that do this without complaining. And then the way that thought process goes of like, I'm a man is supposed to fix these things. I have the tools are right here. Right. You know, a tariff is a tool. It's not as if tariffs were invented this past week or anything.
No.
And obviously, when Trump was running, he was running on strength. You saw dudes that were voting for Trump talk about how we need strength right now and everything. Mm-hmm. He's a man. He has a tool. Let's just fix the thing. And the only thing he's missing is knowledge on how the thing works. Right. And that does mean that the house we're in is going to leak very badly for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Love that. Love that analogy. Very, very funny. All right, let's see what Jimmy Kimmel had to say in his monologue last night on ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Today is tax day. It's April 15th. Does anyone even work at the IRS anymore? Do we even have to? Our IRS office downtown, they turned it into a Spirit Halloween store. I don't know if you need to. This is that special time of the year when I have the opportunity to claim Guillermo not just as a friend, but as a dependent. And I thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome, Jimmy. You're welcome.
You know, in Chicago tonight, Joe Biden made his first appearance in public since he left office. And man, oh man, did he come out of the gate swinging.
I'm staying in the race.
Just let him have it, will you? Biden spoke at a bipartisan event to encourage Democrats and Republicans to work to protect Social Security together, which seems about as likely to happen as a reboot of Fiddler on the Roof starring Kanye West. But Social Security is number one for Joe Biden. Literally, his Social Security number is 1. I don't know if Joe Biden's the guy we want to hear from right now. You know, he's too young. 83-year-old Bernie Sanders is the guy we seem to want to hear from right now. He had a rally in Nampa, Idaho last night with AOC. 12,000 people showed up in Nampa. Who even knew there were 12,000 people in Nampa, Idaho? Who even know there was a Nampa, Idaho? If I heard Nampa, I'd be like, oh, Tampa? You mean, no, it's in Nampa. Nampa's what I called my grandparents when I was 2, but the Blue Army showed up in force there. This is hard to believe. Exactly 1 year ago today was day one of Donald Trump's porn star hush money trial in New York. Remember how that seemed? Not even Trump could have dreamed things would turn out this. Even while he was farting himself to sleep in that courtroom, he could not have dreamed. And now look at him, busting the stock market, starting trade wars with our allies, and taking on Harvard University, home to liberal elite alumni like Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Elise Stefanik. Trump wants to stamp out the left-wing thinking that goes on there. After Harvard refused to cave to his demands, Trump froze more than $2 billion worth of federal funding to the school. And who better to determine what colleges should and should not be doing than the man who had to shell out $25 million in penalties for running a fraudulent university he named after himself. But Harvard, unlike a lot of schools, is standing strong. They tweeted, they said, we will not surrender. And my money's on Harvard. I grew up in the 80s. I've seen Revenge of the Nerds. I know who wins these things.
There you go. That is Jimmy Kimmel Last Night, and that's all I've got for you. How about it? Well, hope you appreciated that. Hope you learned as much as I did in putting it all together from it. And now it's time to get to where I really learned from Professor Eric Segall of Georgia State University. Get his books, listen to his podcast, follow him on Blue Sky and elsewhere. Let him know that you heard him here. We love Eric Segall. This is a great conversation, and at the end, he tells a story about his career that I think he might have shared before, but it's worth hearing again. It's poignant and provocative and timely and relevant. We love Eric Segall, and I always love our talk, so let's do it right now with the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall. That's right. It is time. The Legal Eagle is joining us. He's very emotional. He's very, as we all are, worried and concerned. So just to say the state of things, of course, it's great to see you. Haven't seen you since Vegas, but really happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Pete. I've actually taken kind of a break from writing blogs and doing other things. But for you, anytime, anywhere, anyplace.
You're the greatest. That's very kind of you. I gave my dad your books the other day. He was here and he wanted to borrow some books. He's like, I've never read Segal's books.
Do you want to burn them? No, I'm kidding.
No, he's a huge fan.
I know.
And I overheard him reading the personal note that you wrote in it to my mother, and it was so sweet.
To my mother? What?
He read the note that you wrote to me at the beginning of.
Oh, yes, to you.
Book.
Yes.
You read that note out loud to my mom.
Tell the audience what I said. You have it in front of you?
I don't have it.
Okay.
It was, I'm only using you for your radio program, Eric. It was so kind. I'll find it and share it.
Which I've said on your show so many times, I shouldn't repeat it again, is that you changed the arc of my career completely. 1%.
Well, you changed the arc of mine too. So we're even, always even. Not that anybody's keeping track. What I'm trying to keep track of is the violations of the Constitution by administration. And so I know it's hard for you and any scholar or anybody who works on these issues to keep track of the number of and the subject matter and the severity or the extremity of them. But it's also difficult for the rest of us who aren't legal scholars to even know if something is legal or illegal. I try to stay open-minded and say, this looks horrible, but I don't know, maybe Obama did it. Maybe Ronald Reagan did it. I don't know. That's why I talk to you. So it's the frequency or the number of actual laws that you feel have been broken by this administration, this executive branch, and how broken they have been, like how extreme they have been. This is completely unprecedented what we're seeing in terms of almost daily challenges. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yes. And not challenges exclusively by the ACLU, by, liberal groups that have traditionally brought liberal challenges. Just today, my friend who's been on your show twice, Ilya Soman, who teaches at, I never call it this, Pete, but I'll call it this for this purpose today, Scalia Law, otherwise known as George Mason. Ilya is a diehard libertarian. He's not conservative, but he's very libertarian, and he and I disagree on everything. But even he today filed a lawsuit, his interest group did. What I'm saying is moderate libertarians, moderates, and even conservatives are taking part in these lawsuits at times, because what President Trump is doing should not be a Republican-Democrat issue. It should be Republican and Democrats on one side and MAGA on the other.
Some of these things, you've always been great. I've always loved this about you, that you say, I'm not the expert on that specific issue or subject within the law. And then you'll start telling me all kinds of interesting things about golf. Ugh. Please
didn't
stop.
watch golf on Sunday.
Please stop. It was so sad. It was so sad.
That was a moment for the ages.
It was so sad to see you posting about golf on Sunday. So
one day, Pete, one day.
I think that I just want to ask you about a few issues before we get to what's happened with this man who's been deported and habeas corpus and the history of all that and so on. Yeah. But, one of the when I saw this guy who today was driving and had a I love the Constitution bumper sticker, I wanted to just pull up to him and be like, what do you think of birthright citizenship, that part of the Constitution? So I'm going to submit that still seems to be the most blatant.
No,
thing.
it's not.
That's not the most blatant.
No, it's not even. It's 3 universes away from the most blatant and worst thing the administration is doing right now.
Oh, okay. All right. So why don't you?
Let me be clear. It's an open and slam dunk case, or should be, in a world where law matters, and the consequences are terrible for many people, and it's not even close to the worst thing.
It's not close to the worst in terms of impact. I'm sorry. When I mean blatant, I mean like an idiot like me who's not a scholar can understand what that means, birthright citizenship.
There's something more blatant than that. There's something more blatant than that.
What's more blatant than that? If you're born...
A person who is legally here, has a legal right to be here. Now, there are many ways to be legally here. You can be an American citizen, obviously, and be legally here. You can be a green card holder, which I was for much of my life, and be legally here. Another way to be legally here is to overstay your visa, overstay your whatever reason you're here, and then seek asylum or seek some kind of protection, because if you're sent back to your home country, you will face persecution. Now, Pete, I am not an expert in the ins and outs of that, the nuts and bolts of that. But what I can tell you is the Trump administration took a person who was legally here, who no court in America had ever judged to be guilty of anything, and who even had a piece of paper saying you had a right to be here, which you don't. All you have is your passport and your birth certificate. He had a paper saying he can't be deported. And with no due process and no judge, they simply sent him to a torture prison in a different country.
So you got right to that issue.
There's nothing. Pete, Scalia said in 2005 or 6, don't hold me to the year, in the Hamdi case, which involved the Bush administration taking an American citizen and basically putting him away with no due process because he was an alleged terrorist and he wasn't, but an alleged terrorist and part of 9/11. And the court issued a terrible decision saying that he gets a neutral decision in front of a military court, but no jury trial. And Justice Scalia joined with Justice Stevens, the only time in history that ever happened, where Scalia and Stevens agreed on something and wrote separately together. That, and then the other liberals dissented too, that, what are you talking about? Hamdi was an American citizen, so it's not the same, but still, he was an American citizen who the administration is arguing is entitled to no due process. They can take him off the streets and put him anywhere. And Scalia said, no, they can't do that. There's only 2 options. Scalia said the writ of habeas corpus is the central part of our constitutional protections. The founding fathers put it in the Constitution for a reason. England, it goes back to the Magna Carta. And the reason this is so important is if you're living in a country where the executive can take you off the streets with no judicial review and throw you away, you're living in a country of fear and tyranny. And the founding fathers did not believe in that country. They didn't. In fact, your audience should like this. One of the things in the Declaration of Independence, one of our grievances against England was they used to do that. They would take people off the street and send to Devil's Island or something. And one of our grievances was, no, countries can't do that. There has to be habeas corpus. So no.
For white people.
It's irrelevant whether he was a citizen or a legal immigrant here with papers. He was legally here, and now he's in a torture prison in El Salvador with no judicial involvement, Pete.
Let me just go back. First of all, habeas corpus is a phrase, a term that not everybody knows what it means. Okay. Certainly, I had to look it up. A court order that requires a prisoner to be brought before a judge to challenge their detention. Do you like that definition?
That's exactly what it is. Let's say tomorrow I get arrested because I've been threatened with arrest 9 times. Let's say I get arrested tomorrow by the administration. The only protection I have from that is the writ of habeas corpus. Now, if they give me a jury trial and all that, that's fine. But if they throw me away without a key and say, you're not going to, that's what Bush did, the first Bush. We're going to throw these prisoners away in Guantanamo. We're not giving them a hearing. We're not giving them anything.
But those were people that were picked up in other countries. That's the
No. Hamdi was picked up. Well, Hamdi was picked up in Afghanistan, but there was someone else at the same time who was picked up here.
Most of the people in Guantanamo were picked up in other countries, but not all of them. You're right. So just going back on this guy, you described it as he was here legally.
Yes.
I should be talking to an immigration law expert, I suppose, but just help me understand, because what I've heard is that he entered the country, quote, illegally. I think that's
right.
So if he entered the country illegally.
So after that, he got a legal permission to stay. That second in time thing matters, Pete. A lot of people, the story I'm going to tell if we have time to, and it's okay if we don't, is about people who came here not legally. A lot of immigrants don't come here through the legal process. I'm not condoning that. You should try to come here through the legal process. But if you don't, and you cure that later, then you're legally here.
My understanding is the most of the people who are here, quote, illegally, arrived legally through a port of entry, like on an airplane, a train, or a boat, or a car, more likely. They arrived legally and they stayed. They overstayed, which makes them here illegally.
Not this guy.
But not this guy, right. And not a lot of other people who find other ways, And this guy was also like a union member. Like he was
He's an American citizen. Can we just he has an American citizen wife. Can we stop there?
Really important point that I don't feel like people are bringing up enough. What does that mean? If you marry an American citizen,
I don't care what it means legally. Morally, it means, what are we doing? What's a country? I'm sorry, I'm gonna get. I lived through this not myself, obviously, but I had a case like this when I was a law clerk, and it was a very emotional case. So I get emotional about this issue. It means he has protections. It means he's here legally, and therefore has the same right to habeas corpus that I do. Or you do. That's what it means.
Also, this guy, I'm not sure that he was ever charged with a crime. He was charged, but
there's no evidence of any crime. And by the way, eventually, I believe the Trump administration said to the district court, I believe he's committed no crimes, to the best of our knowledge. What he did was he spoke out. He spoke out against our policies, or he's against our. He's trying to make the government less safe. But no, he's not been charged with a crime. The answer is he's not been charged with a crime. So someone in America, everything else, free speech, abortion, affirmative action, even guns, even campaign finance, which you and I have spent 10 years talking about. Let's take those 5 issues: abortion, affirmative action, guns, campaign finance, 4 issues. They're unbelievably important. I've been passionate about it for, 30. You've heard me rant and rave. Those are small potatoes compared to this. So every argument Trump is making, or his lawyers are making, or he's making, in favor of this policy would apply to American citizens. What he said was he's now in a foreign country. I have no control over him. There's nothing I can do. It's up to them whether they return him or not. Well, if they had taken me, they would have said the same thing.
Right.
That is terrifying.
Of course.
And by the way, twice now, Trump has said, once on camera, I think once caught on camera, if it's legal, I want to do this to Americans.
He said it, I think. Yeah, I think he said it twice now, at least. So just going back.
Everything. If he can send Chuck Schumer to El Salvador, it's all over.
The other issue that's along these lines, and I don't want to move past just this one case, but they're also going and grabbing off the street, specifically people who had protested Israel in favor of Palestinian humanity or whatever. Now, you hear a lot of people making the argument about, well, if these people were not citizens, because this is who I'm specifically talking about, protesters, students at Columbia and other universities, many others, who were not American citizens, but they were students at those colleges and they were protesting. Now, I don't know if they broke a law or not during the protest. I'm sure that's a fine line. But generally speaking, just talk to me a little bit about the history of and what the Constitution says about the right to assemble and protest and how it applies differently to me versus a non-citizen American student.
It doesn't. It applies exactly the same. Now, the college may have rules, but as far as the government is concerned, no. And an immigrant who is not here legally has the same free speech rights to go into the square and make, talk as I do and you do.
So someone who is here illegally cannot be arrested for being in the streets and holding a sign.
The way to make that point clearer is someone who's here illegally cannot be arrested for the crime of being a Muslim or for the crime of being – why? Because that would violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. We know this, right? I don't have to tell you this. If someone from a different country is here illegally and is caught, you can arrest them for crimes, for stealing, for immigration crimes. You can't arrest them for speaking out. That's a violation of the First Amendment.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to be clear about the protest issue. And I also feel like it's something that we should celebrate as Americans, not only these freedoms of speech, the First Amendment, but the idea that we can protest things that our government is doing that we don't like at the local, state, or federal level, any level. We can protest them because it allows us to express ourselves, to show. I mean, this is a very unique thing about America, and the history of American protest is, I think, a very colorful and important history. And it does seem, as I was thinking about it, that a lot of these types of protests throughout history have been kind of left-wing progressive. I think of anti-war, the civil rights protests, and so on. And so I also thought, it's probably true that conservative-leaning Americans and Trump-supporting Americans don't like protests, period. You don't see them out in the street other than like abortion. I couldn't think of too many right-wing issues that those folks would go out and protest about.
Same-sex marriage garnered a lot of protests. Pete, in the early 1980s, not 50s and 60s, in the early 1980s, the black community was boycotting stores. I think it was South Carolina. I'm having a senior moment, but it doesn't matter. They were basically doing organized boycotts of stores that even in the 1980s would not, were discriminating against blacks. As 30 years after Brown, they're still discriminating against blacks. But it was speech. It was peaceful. It was outside the businesses. Don't shop here. And that was challenged as an illegal boycott. And there are some boycotts, organized boycotts, that are illegal. And in a very important case, the Supreme Court held, it may have been the 60s. I'm pretty sure it was the 80s. The Supreme Court held that you have a right to peacefully protest and a right to peaceful speech. If that amounts to a boycott, too bad, as long as it's peaceful, which it was. That was an incredibly important decision for the civil rights movement, because it told the world that peaceful protests in this country are legal. Period. Full stop. Even if they take the form of a boycott.
Wasn't there a big case about abortion protesters and whether they could or could not be close to
before back in the day, abortion protesters would go to abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics, and do terrible things to people coming into they'd yell at them, scream at them, tell them they were evil. And these are women who are already some of them who are emotionally, caught up in all this, obviously. And states put barriers around. Brookline, Massachusetts had a very liberal, might be the most liberal place in America, had a big Planned Parenthood clinic. My parents lived there. That's how I know this. And Massachusetts passed a law, which was a buffer zone around that clinic because somebody was actually hurt physically. So they wanted a physical, and the Supreme Court first said that was constitutional mostly, and then they said it mostly wasn't. So even that, after violence, the court said you could not draw a buffer zone around Planned Parenthood unless it was really tiny and really small. That's how seriously we take free speech in this country.
Right.
You've heard me complain on your show now for 15 years. I'm a big believer in free speech, and you have to be able to protest and assemble and meet. I don't believe in a lot of other free speech issues like campaign finance reform and hate speech. This is the most speech protective country in the history of the world, and it's not close. It's not a close call. So to be doing this today is antithetical to that entire tradition.
Is there anything that you want to say about the authoritarian tactic that the Trump administration is using to threaten universities and colleges as well as law firms? We talked about the law. I think we talked a little bit about it in Vegas, but is there anything?
Let's talk about the colleges. Let's talk about the colleges.
Yeah.
I need to give me a minute here for background. It's important.
Sure.
So there are two federal laws. People know them as Title VI and Title IX. Title VI came first. Obviously, 6 is before 9. Title VI says any institution that receives federal money, any institution that receives federal money is not allowed to discriminate on the basis of race. Okay, that's Title IX. Title VI. Title IX is any educational institution that receives federal money is not entitled to discriminate on the basis of gender. And the obvious origins of both of these laws in the 1960s was we don't want colleges and universities and high schools discriminating on the basis of race and gender. Almost all get federal money. So this was a way to implement the Brown decision and other types of decisions. And then later in the 90s and 2000s, sexual harassment at universities was a real problem. And Title VI was a way to get at, Title IX was a way to get at sexual harassment part of it from institutions that receive federal money.
Mm-hmm.
What Donald Trump has done now is he's threatened Harvard, Georgetown, all those schools by saying, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, we're going to take away all of your money. In Harvard's case, it's billions of dollars. What they're saying is DEI programs violate that non-discrimination pledge, which is wrong in every aspect of it. It was never the purpose of it. It was never, if you want, the original meaning of it. And it was never, it's being weaponized in a way that the people who wrote those statutes never dreamed of.
I'm so glad that you just explained that, because I wasn't quite sure if they had even made a legal argument as to why they were going to do that.
That is a legal argument, but it's completely facetious.
And that's what we heard in that egregious letter written to the Georgetown University by the Assistant Attorney General or something.
Here's the thing. We have had litigation in Title VI and Title IX cases for 30, 40 years now. And we have a well-settled body of case law that says, among other things, and this is not, it's just crystal clear, and it makes sense. The federal government is not allowed to take back any of the money that it gives to universities under Title VI or 29 before a whole bunch of procedural steps. Notice, hearings, due process, all that stuff. And Trump's done none of it. None of it. So it's all illegal. And by the way, in the case of the early mid-70s, late 70s, when colleges were still discriminating on the basis of race in the way you and I would agree was discrimination, even then, to get a remedy of cutoff of federal funds was virtually impossible.
Wow.
So that's where we are. And I don't understand. I'm glad Harvard is fighting it as of yesterday. I don't understand why there's not just one big document signed by 1,000 American universities saying DEI programs do not violate Title VI or Title IX. We will demonstrate that in court. We're not complying. And if you want to sue us for this, they'll lose in court, Pete. The Trump, even in front of the Supreme Court, I believe this Trump administration will lose.
What can you just see any reason as to why the federal government would ever interfere in a college university's curriculum and teaching, much less a K through 12, a local?
Well, that's the other thing. Both of these statutes deal with hiring, promotion,
right?
Those kinds of issues, and sexual harassment and racial harassment. They're not meant to deal with curriculum at all. I mean, it's just not that's another part of the statute, but it's not Title VI and Title IX that has to do anything.
Well, because there's the specific argument is if Harvard, in this case, doesn't provide a critical mass of viewpoints that are different from what they're providing, then they're in violation. I feel like that's what they're saying. They're saying literally you have to provide.
They're saying worse than that. I read the letter this morning.
Okay.
In the government to Harvard. They're saying you do your own investigation, find out which departments are ideologically unbalanced or something like that, which, by the way, Harvard is pretty much every department, but that's neither here nor there. And if you find a department that is ideologically imbalanced, you must hire people to redress that imbalance. Okay, Title VI and Title IX are about race and gender, not about ideology or politics.
And just to be clear, for years, the right, your friend Leonard Leo, the Federalist Society, Project 2025 laid this out, wanted to destroy not only public education and privatize it, but certainly higher education because they thought it made people liberal.
But notice, Pete,
right? Is that right?
Yes. And notice so far, they're only going after the elites. Why is that? I mean, there are 1,000 universities in the United States that use DEI, even much more blatantly than Oberlin. Let's take Oberlin College in Ohio. Oberlin is basically, I'm going to be joking here, a communist school. I mean,
very liberal.
Everyone at Oberlin is incredibly progressive, incredibly liberal. There's no balance. It's a private school, but they receive federal money too. The idea that the federal government could come in and change what Oberlin is through now one conservative response is, if you don't want to follow our rules, don't take our money. Now, I'm sympathetic to that response, Pete. I always have been, because it goes right back to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. So I'm not saying that argument is necessarily legally or even value-wise bad. What I am saying is there's no legal authority for this government to make that argument at this time, because Title VI and IX don't do that. What Title VI and IX do say is if you discriminate on the basis. Right. So we can have an argument about Harvard's previous affirmative action program, which is now no longer there because of the case. But 3 years ago, when Harvard was using affirmative action, could you argue that was discrimination based on race? I wouldn't, you wouldn't, and any sane person would not. But at least that activity is captured by the statute. By giving some people of color some edge up, you're discriminating in violation of the statute, which is why Title VI was part of the Harvard case and the Chapel Hill case. That's not a frivolous argument. I don't agree with it. It's not frivolous. This is frivolous. What they're doing now is not that. It's you have to change your identity to get federal money. But that's not what's really going on here, Pete. They're trying to destroy elite, private, and public education because they're trying to destroy all guardrails. That's why they're going after the companies, too. That's why they're going after the law firms. They want to destroy all guardrails, Pete, and they're doing it.
So let me ask you about another. I want to get to this issue, the story about the Mariel boat lift and your role there when you were at Department of Justice, right? But I wanted to.
Law clerk. Sorry, just law clerk. As a law clerk.
As a law clerk.
I was working for a judge.
But just real quick on this issue of tariffs, it would seem, again, that this is a huge power grab by the president, by the executive branch, taking what should be the legislative branch's power to levy tariffs. And apparently there is a statute that allows in emergency, in a war against another country, the executive can unilaterally apply tariffs. And it would seem, without knowing much, that that's pretty specific. And I think the administration has argued that's exactly what happened with one country, I think Venezuela or something like that, somebody that they're tariffing. But more, they're tariffing everybody. We're not at war with anybody, really, including Canada and Mexico. And so you're seeing the legislative branch push back, and Congress is taking votes. Democrats are trying to have a vote. They don't control Congress, that would, and some Republicans, though, in the Senate, like Rand Paul and others, don't like these tariffs, that are saying, no, that's our job. That's our role. So just on the role, what the Constitution says about who can just decide which countries get punished economically and which don't. Because Russia's not.
The Constitution doesn't say anything about tariffs except states can't do it.
The Constitution doesn't say anything about tariffs.
Except for states can't do it. States can't put, an individual state is not allowed to do it. That's in the Constitution.
Okay.
So a little bit about the tariff discussion that's not legal is above my pay grade, because I'm not an economist and I'm not. But the part that's in my pay grade is this. Where's Leonard Leo right now? Seriously, because for like 20 years, he's been arguing that the executive branch is not allowed to make major decisions, major questions, unless Congress authorizes it too. That Congress has to be the one. The whole attack on the administrative state, Pete, is Congress has to specifically say what they want. And if they give the executive branch discretion, that violates somehow the separation of powers. Where is he today? Because giving a president the power to impose tariffs on all countries unilaterally without an emergency, without an invasion, is like the biggest major question there is. Right. And the conservatives aren't saying a thing. My friend Ilya Soman is, and he filed a lawsuit today on this. But the FedSoc elite, you're not hearing anything from them. And that's really terrible. Now, I have canvassed a lot of people who are well-versed in economics and the history of tariffs in this country. And one thing that I think almost all historians agree on is that absent compelling circumstances, they're a disaster. And they've always been a disaster. And there isn't much else to say about it, which is why, and by the way, the only reason Trump likes them is because of this insane story about this fake guy, Peter Navarro, who knows nothing about anything and claimed to be an expert by citing himself under a false name. Like he cited this. The whole story is insane.
To be clear, Navarro's real, but he created a fake guy based on his own last name, which is...
He created a fake guy to cite. It's like me writing an article saying the Supreme Court is not a court. Footnote, see James Smith, 2006. Yeah. And James Smith turns out to be me.
I mean, academics don't do that, and legislators don't do that, and even like commentators without any credibility don't do that. The only person I know who's done that is Donald Trump when he pretended to be his own publicist.
Exactly. So it's all consistent, right?
It's crazy. It's a crazy thing. That's a crazy thing. And I feel like
I've been reading the people who are experts in this writing about this story. I heard an interview with Stephanie Krull, some woman on MSNBC.
Stephanie Ruhle.
rule. And she was interviewed by Pablo Torre, who I'm interested in for other reasons, as a professional matter. And it was a great interview. And she's very smart. And she was like, the economic people are like, what is happening? This is even Trumpier than Trump. Like, this guy is a complete fraud in every way.
I like that guy too, Pablo. Everybody seems to like this guy. Pablo
Torre. He's a good guy. He's a little full of himself, but he's a good guy.
Okay, fair enough. I also just one other quick one. Back last year, when the Supreme Court decided on the president having immunity, how is that ruling playing out? Because a lot of times I find people making arguments online on social media and other places that make total sense, just not realizing that decision is even there or how it applies to whatever subject that we're talking about. And I feel like I don't hear enough about the Supreme Court's decision to allow Trump to have immunity, which it would seem makes emboldened everybody in Trump too, this administration, to commit all kinds of crimes. But I haven't seen as much talk about it, I feel.
Well, let's be clear. That Trump immunity decision only applies to the president, not his office.
Right. But I mean, the whole idea was that if you do this for me, I won't get in trouble and I'll pardon you. That theory exists, right. I suppose.
Yes. No, the Trump immunity decision is the only case in my career, starting in 1991, that spans the affirmance of and reversal of affirmative action, abortion, campaign finance, everything. It's the only issue I've ever seen where no one I respect got it right. No one predicted it right. Not Randy Barnett, not any of the conservatives, none of them. Because no one thought that these men and women, these five, Barrett's opinion is less terrible, but Roberts and the other four, no one thought they would say to President Trump, or Donald Trump, sure, commit crimes and it'll be virtually impossible to prosecute. It's not impossible. So, for example, if Donald Trump was, not the analogy you think is coming, if Donald Trump was walking down Fifth Avenue with his Secretary of Treasury and says, I'm thinking about putting tariffs on Israel or whatever. I'm thinking realistically, Yemen. I'm going to put tariffs on Yemen. And the Treasury guy goes, no, Mr. President, that violates 15 laws. You have to get Congress's permission. By the way, it's a terrible idea and it's illegal in 96 different ways. You know what? I don't fucking care. I'm going to do it anyway. And he does it. And he does it for personal gain. He does it because that country promised him $10 million if he would do it or not do it. It doesn't matter. A different country said, put tariffs on Yemen and I'll put $10 million in your pocket. And the Secretary of the Treasury says to the president, yes, I know the other country, Saudi Arabia, offered you $10 million to do this. You still can't do it because that's a bribe and that's illegal. He does it anyway. That conversation prior to the Trump decision gets into court. Now it doesn't. You can't prove Trump's motive. So Trump will say, no, I put tariffs on Yemen because I thought it was a good policy idea. And then we're done. Even if we know that he took a bribe to do it. It's crazy.
What about the executive, the cabinet secretary, the agency that carries out the order that the president, who might be immune from prosecution? What about the attorney general or the treasury secretary or any other head of any agency that carries out?
You'd have to prove they intentionally and clearly violated clearly established law.
Is that not the case with deporting Abrego?
I don't know. Probably, Pete, but
and several other people who may not have been guilty of anything, of any crimes. But
I think I don't know how we're living in a world where reporters said to the Attorney General of the United States, what's going on here? Get him back or something. And she responds, we are powerless. He's in a foreign country. To which the reporters say, but you've basically admitted you made a mistake, which they basically have admitted, I think, that they made a mistake.
Yeah.
And she says, that's out of our hands. Well, Pete, that's worse than that's Putin, Stalin. I mean, that's taking.
Yeah, I guess the reason why it works is so many Americans, like a frighteningly large, probably not a majority, if you explain to them what had happened. But so many Americans are totally fine with it. Man, I've seen people online, people in my town on Facebook just defending it over and over and over again. And that's why they can get away with it. Like,
wait, Pete, even when you say there was never a hearing as to whether he committed a crime, whether he was here legally. Pete, I had a green card from 1963 to 1983. I was a resident alien. The idea they could take me and send me to El Salvador with no hearing is fucking insane.
That's because you were born in Canada. Is that right?
Yes. This guy had every right to be here.
So yeah, but just to be clear, I think, and I think you know this, what Trump supporters see are non-white people being sent out of the country. I mean, they want a whiter country. So if there's any way to stop them from coming in.
Have you seen his picture?
If there's any way to stop them from coming in or get rid of the ones we already have, and that includes black bodies, by imprisoning them.
That's why we have courts. That's why we have fucking courts.
And it also includes any American, I guess not accused of a crime or not found guilty of a crime, but any American apparently by this time accused of a crime because they love, quote, law and order, and they're the ones who decide what the crimes are, and they don't commit the types of crimes that would get you sent out of the country, I guess. But, if you're an American and you're white and you murder somebody, you commit a horrible crime. Some people would not mind, certainly even the white guy, being sent to some torture chamber in another country, to be clear. So if you to
be clear, that's completely illegal
to send an American.
Yes.
Yes. It's also weird that they don't just do what every other president, Obama deported more than any before him or something like that. But when they deported people who had committed crimes over here illegally, generally speaking, and they focused on those, they just sent them back to their home country or another country. They didn't send them necessarily back to custody or put them in prison. They just sent them back. You're out of here, right?
So Pete, I'm trying to figure out the right way to phrase this because you're going to get mad at me. Prior to Trump, our immigration system was in disarray.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's taken it to new levels of extreme depravity. Judge Posner, that's why I didn't want you to get mad at me. Judge Posner, who was a judge on the Seventh Circuit for about 30 years, or 40 years, excuse me, used to rant to me at the top of his voice, screaming that he could not believe he was in the Seventh Circuit, which is Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, not exactly Florida, Texas, and California, right, in terms of the southern border. He told me that immigration law judges were the bane of his existence, that our immigration system was cruel, inhumane, torturous. This is a Republican who was appointed by Ronald Reagan, torturous and terrible. And he personally got involved in immigration cases and got in trouble for it because the system was so broken. And that's all before Donald Trump. So what he saw was an opening in an already broken system to basically make it 100 times more broken. And as always with Trump, that's what sells it, Pete, because he has a kernel of truth. As always, there's some just tiny 1% of truth. I know, and most informed and even uninformed Americans know our immigration system is broken, has been broken for a long time. So that's the kernel.
And the main reason why it's broken, let's be clear. This is very important because people like to blame it on politicians and government. The main primary reason why it is so broken is because Republicans, as long as I've been covering this issue, refuse to make an attempt to fix it through the only solution, which would be comprehensive legislation, which would mean a lot of new laws and regulations. And in 2013, when Obama was president, they killed it then, even though a lot of Republicans agreed in the Senate. John Boehner didn't take it up for a vote. And then recently, obviously, we saw Trump kill it when Republicans were in a pass. So the reason why our system is so broken, it would always be broken. There will always be problems and loopholes with immigration, for God's sake. Every country has issues. But the reason it's so broken is because Republicans would never allow it to be fixed, because fixing it would mean there would be a more streamlined idea. Again, I'm going to say it, for non-white, non-Christian people to get in this country.
But it's not just that. They want the issue in the political arena because it helps, as you pointed out.
First and foremost, but the reason why they want it in the political arena is because they want less non-white, non-Christian people in this country.
I have my colleague who you should have on your show. So I'm making this announcement for everybody. My colleague is Anthony Christ. He has a huge following on all.
Yeah, I love Anthony. Yeah,
many times my following. I'm just going to say it. I'm proud to report that out of 200 law schools, my law school was ranked 79th in overall quality, which is an incredibly stupid ranking. But on constitutional law, which is exclusively reputation and peers, only con law professor, we were 41, which is really...
Wow. That, by the way, just real quick, that 79 number is significant to me because I'm the 79th most famous celebrity from Central New York.
Well, there are 200 law schools, so top third is not bad for us. But anyway,
and there are 79 celebrities from Central New York.
Anthony is great, and he is fighting with Randy Barnett and others about birthright citizenship. And here's something I didn't know until today, because I'm not an expert in this. I never claimed to be. Did you know, Pete, that until we had the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1870-something, which basically kept all Asians, all Chinese people out of America, we had open borders. We had open borders for half our country's history. They just come. You just come. Don't commit a crime. Get a job. You stay. If you want to become a citizen, that's more complicated. But if you just want to come and be peaceful and have a happy life, my friend, my conservative libertarian Scalia law friend, I think thinks that should be the rule today. Like, he's for open borders today. He wants the whole world to be open borders. He has a whole complex plan for it'll work itself out. We don't need immigration laws. I got to tell you, 10 years ago, he told me that, and I argued with him. He told me that a couple of days ago. I'm like, that makes sense to me now. I get it. That everybody if you commit a crime, you commit a crime, you go to jail. That's how our country worked until 1870-something.
Our jails.
Isn't that interesting, though? I found that interesting.
It is interesting. Of course it's interesting. The idea of borders, we could get into all of it. Let me get to the story from your life that you think is relevant and important. And this has to do, of course, with the Cuban exodus in the late 70s, early 80s, and the 1980 Mariel boat lift. You want me to read something about it?
No. Let me...
you set it up.
I'm not sure. It's a 10-minute story, and the timing is important. I have no problem if you're saying, let's not do that.
It's 10 minutes. Go for it. I'll see. I'll if I stay paying attention to it.
I did have a reason to discuss this in one of my classes this week, and I kind of broke down over it in class. So I may do that again. I don't know, but I think it's a super important story. I do think.
Okay, just talk clearly and be succinct.
Okay. Most people tell me that's my strength.
Okay. I know. I was kind of saying the podcaster said to the constitutional law lecturer.
So I am clerking for a district court trial judge in Atlanta, Georgia in 1983, 84, 85. And in 1980, 125,000 Cubans left Cuba, boat, plane, all kinds of ways. About, 20,000 of those, give or take, came by boat. They arrived in Miami. Most of those 150,000 people, actually, this is a lesson too. I hadn't thought this was a lesson, but most of them ended up being law-abiding citizens and are still with us in America today. But some of them, many of them, committed terrible crimes and were clearly criminals who shouldn't be free. Some of them were not. So there were about 1,500 in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. And a judge, not my judge, was in charge of the hearings as to what happens to those people. And this was subject to delicate negotiations between Ronald Reagan and Fidel Castro in the early 80s, because we didn't want these people, we didn't want the precedent of a country letting its jails open and saying, go to America, that's fine. And it was a real problem. The ACLU was representing these prisoners in front of a different judge in Atlanta. And the argument was, just give them a hearing. If they have a criminal past or they have something in their record that says that they're dangerous or mentally ill, then they go back to prison or back to Cuba. But if they're not that, if they're not criminals, they're petitioning for asylum, and we have rules about asylum. Now, back then, if you arrived here like that, you basically had very little asylum rights. So this is all happening very fast. It's announced on the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Reagan and Castro reach a deal. 20 or so, some number of the Cubans are going back on a plane sometime in the near future. Immediately, the ACLU and an immigration group file suit in my court, my judge's court, saying they can't do that. We have to get at least one hearing. That's why it's like today. At least one hearing before you deport these people, because some of them are not criminals, some of them are not mentally ill, and some of them have very clear claims for asylum. They're going to be killed immediately upon return to Cuba. So my judge said there'll be a hearing in 24 hours. Come. The woman for the government was about 7.5 months pregnant. I was working for a very conservative judge who had run for senator a few years earlier in Georgia and lost. deeply conservative man. We disagreed on virtually all public policy issues, but a deeply principled man, and most importantly, Pete, a good man. And that's what we don't have today, unfortunately, is judges who are good. We disagreed about some things, most things, but we agreed on morality. We agreed on what's right and what's wrong. So we go to this hearing. He's sitting behind the bench. I'm in the law clerk's chair. And he says to the government, all I need today is when is the plane going? Because the ACLU and so are saying we need one hearing, and I'm not going to have the hearings. They're going to go in front of the other judge. But I'm the chief judge. I took the case away from that judge because I want to know, just tell me when the plane is going so he can have his hearings before the plane goes. That's all. And the 7.5 pregnant woman who's really showing says, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I can give you no information. He said, what? And he said, I can't tell you if, when, or how. I am not at liberty, and you're not entitled to know, and I don't have to tell you. So we go back, and I can disclose this, Pete, because when I'm disclosing now, first of all, he's passed away, so there's no clerk-judge privilege anymore because he passed away. But secondly, I'm not revealing the core of the discussion. I'm revealing the general parameters. And I said, the immigrants had filed a TRO, temporary restraining order, stop the plane. Stop the plane until we get a hearing. That's all we're asking, not just stop the plane until we get a hearing. My judge said, if you tell me when the plane is going, we can do that. We're not going to tell you. It could be tomorrow. It could be in 5 minutes. It could be a year from now. So we go back, and my judge said, I said to my judge, so I assume you want me to write up a short order denying the temporary restraining order, and then we'll give reasons later. Like we'll give them we'll say, no, we can't stop the plane, obviously. Memorandum to come. He says to me, this is where I get emotional, Pete. He says, no, Eric, I'm not doing that. And I said, really? Judge, I'm sorry, but I researched this. You have to do that. They have no legal claims. The government is right. They have no obligation to tell you. They have no obligation to do anything. And I'm sorry that's the law, but that's the law, and I can't change that. He said, Eric, I am not sending a single person to his death or her death without a hearing. I'm not doing it. And the article I sent you, so what he said was, this is like capital punishment. It's like telling someone they're getting capital punishment, and it's happening 3 days later, and no hearing at all. And I said, Eric, I can't do it. I said, Judge, you're going to be reversed. And I think you're going to be reversed immediately, and you're going to be reversed with condescension and anger by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. I don't care. I'm not going to be part of this. So I go back to my desk. I write up an order which has no legal basis. I admit it. There's almost no legal basis. I go back and I say, Judge, 8 hours later, overnight, Judge, I did my best, but this is not persuasive. You're going to be reversed on this. Eric, I'm not going to be part of this. I may not be able to stop it. It's a conservative Republican. I am not going to be part of it. So we issued the order, a temporary restraint. I mean, if you think about it in hindsight, we told the President of the United States he was not allowed to send this plane of Cubans back to Cuba. 3 hours later, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, in an opinion by a Judge Vance, who tragically, terribly, and horrifically was assassinated by a mail bomb 3 years later. Judge Vance writes an opinion for two other judges saying, Judge Moy, this was wrong. You have no basis for this. Reversed. And the plane takes off the next day. A couple of days later, the government announces in the press, we're going to send a second plane. Judge Moy does the same thing all over again. And they come in, and same thing. We're not going to tell you when, not going to tell you how, not going to tell you under what conditions, not your business. We go back to chambers, and Judge Moy says, write up the order again. Restrain the plane. I said, Judge, the 11th Circuit reversed you on this 10 days ago, and they made it clear in no uncertain terms that you can't do this. Eric, I am not going to be a part of this. I cannot sleep at night I understand they're going to have to go back. They're going to lose on the merits, probably. But if America stands for anything, it stands for you have a hearing first. I said, okay, but you're going to be reversed. He says, fine. So I basically copied the order I did 10 days ago, or whatever it was, 2 weeks ago. He restrains the plane again. And this time the 11th Circuit comes in and says reversed. And if you do this again, we will take the case away from you. And the lawyers are not allowed to go back to court and argue this again. They reversed him in the most humiliating way possible. And I have so many conflicting feelings about that entire episode, Pete, because it was a time when deeply conservative judges, who I don't agree with on most things, had a sense of ethics and morality that was real and that mattered. And we don't have those judges anymore on the right, anywhere. We have some old ones. There's a Judge Wilkinson on the Fourth Circuit, who's a great Republican judge. But there are very few around because Judge Wilkinson came of age before the Federalist Society. All of the judges who came of age post 1982 they've lost what Judge Moy had, which was some sense of responsibility to the Constitution.
The conservative judges that have been appointed.
And frankly, we could use more of this on the left as well.
Yeah, but because of the Federalist Society's 30-year efforts, well-funded efforts, they've been able to, and because of the consequences of many elections, we've elected, Bush and then of course, obviously Trump, and the appointments that were made by those presidents to all those.
If my judge he knew this ended any chance of promotion to the Court of Appeals. He had no interest in the Supreme Court, of course, but he knew this ended he didn't want to be in 11th Circuit, so that was okay. Today, it would end your career. I mean, you could be a judge, but you wouldn't be invited to FedSoc events. You wouldn't be invited to anything. But here's the big point of all of this, Pete. There are some universal principles, I think, that transcend law and transcend the Constitution. Very few, but a few. And one of them is when there's an obvious right and an obvious wrong. No one can disagree. It's just right or wrong, and there's just no doubt. And we can argue affirmative action, we can argue abortion, we can argue campaign finance reform. We can't argue that you want to live in a country where you can be taken off the streets and sent to a foreign torture prison with no hearing. Like, that can't be a country we live in. And Justice Scalia knew that when he wrote one of his strongest dissents ever, telling the Bush administration, you have two choices. You either get Congress to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, which is Congress's job, but you can ask Congress to do that, or you give these people the constitutional protections they deserve. That's it. There's no in between. And that's true here for this guy in right now suffering in El Salvador. He had a right to a hearing, Pete, just like you and I would. And he didn't get it. And he's probably dead. I assume he's dead by now. And it's just the tragedy of this. And those Mario Cubans, some of them were bad people, Pete. Some of them were terrible people who shouldn't have been here. But the worst of them still deserve one hearing to determine if they can be sent to their fucking death.
I don't think you should assume he's dead. I think there's reason to believe he's alive.
I don't know. I shouldn't.
I mean, his wife spoke out publicly today. So, I mean,
I hope he's alive. So, has she heard from him? Have we heard about anything about that?
I don't think so. I'm confused as to whether or not there's any proof that he's there or that he's alive. I haven't heard. So if somebody listening has seen it, I missed it.
I mean, Pete, Lynn and I, it could happen to anybody. It could happen to you, Pete. Well, this rationale applies to you. We made a mistake, but he's gone. Nothing we can do. The only difference is if it happened to you or me, I hope, that would end the presidency. I hope. Are you confident of that?
I mean, I'm just thinking about how to affect the podcast.
Before we end, Pete, serious question. If my friend Erwin Chemerinsky, who's dean of Berkeley, the most famous liberal law professor other than Lawrence Tribe of the last 50 years, if Trump sent Erwin to El Salvador for no reason, would that end his presidency? He's a famous public figure. CNN, he's been on, OJ case made him famous.
I don't think anything ends his presidency per se. I think that this
Cruz would go, that's okay.
I think that, when you say end his presidency, I would imagine you're implying that Republican senators and House members would vote for impeachment.
Either that or violent protests in Washington, Pete.
Well, violent protests, I don't know how they necessarily lead to the end of his presidency. But if you're asking, would elected Republicans impeach him? If you're asking, would the MAGA fever break and he wouldn't, yes. I don't know exactly specifically what you're asking me, but I think that the thing that
Taylor Swift.
I don't think any moral issue. No, I don't think any moral issue like that ends his presidency. Or no, Taylor Swift, anybody. Especially, listen, I think that cruelty is the point. I think that they would rather see liberals or people they consider liberal or people they just don't like suffer. They would rather see them suffer than even necessarily keep their jobs. I think that's where we're at with a lot of these Trump supporters. they're so bad, and what they want is to see the pain of it. So no, I don't think that would. I think the only thing that ends Trump is an economic issue. It's not a moral issue, not a criminal.
Too, so.
Yeah, I mean, people, if the dollar sinks and everybody loses their job and your investment portfolio, I mean, you saw him cave on the tariffs. He's still putting them in, and so it's still going to be bad. But I think the only way that breaks is if the pain of the average Trump supporter is so.
So Pete, the reason. So I know we both have to go. Let me end my part of this with this. There could not be further separation from, let's just say, an alleged rapist who was in Cuba and was set out by Castro on a boat to come to America in 1980, and Charles A. Moy Jr., my judge, a deeply loyal Republican and deeply conservative man of faith. Those two individuals could not be more different. Like their universes apart. My judge did not have liberal tendencies towards criminal law at all. At all. He felt that this was so wrong that he was really risking his reputation, his place, everything, because he thought it was so wrong.
Right.
And what I'm telling you is, you and I have discussed every major non-criminal law, constitutional law issue for the last 15, 12 years ad nauseum, probably to your audience. I mean, we've talked about everything controversial. I am telling you, there is nothing more fundamental, and Scalia agreed with this, than the principle that the executive, it goes back to Magna Carta, the principle, you cannot just arrest people and throw them away or throw them in another country without a formal hearing before a judge.
So the one obvious question I didn't ask you, the Supreme Court seemingly never votes 9-0 on anything. Can you explain that vote and why the Trump administration and people like Stephen Miller and right-wing commentators have said it's a win for Trump? How have they been able to twist it? And what about that vote? Is there a loophole?
Well, first of all, let me correct something you said. They're 9-0 a lot on cases nobody cares about. They take 20, 30 cases a year. They know they're going to be 9-0 on, or almost 9-0, except they don't count Thomas anymore. They know they're going to be 8-1. So that's just a planned strategy. So this decision, as I read it, said that you have to facilitate his return, and no one can be taken out of this country without a hearing. Right? That's what it said, I think. I don't know how they're spinning it, but that's what the 9 justices said. You can't remove people without a hearing.
So you and every other scholar are interpreting the Trump administration's action here as in opposition to or ignoring the Supreme Court's decision.
So the hearing yesterday, the judge and the district court judge had said, I want this, and that, and I want it by a certain time. They showed up at court yesterday and they said, we're not giving you that. They did exact reason. Pete, the reason I brought up the Mario Cubans is the government's position in this case is basically identical to the position in that case. We don't have to tell you anything. We don't owe you anything, and we're not going to tell you anything. The judge asked for a government official to come and tell him where this person is, and kind of how he got there, and what his status is. Her answer is, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do it.
But it sounds like you're saying there's precedent for that.
No, I'm saying an 11th Circuit judge in 1980 in a different circuit, 83, in different circumstances, under different laws, took that position. I don't believe that's a legally viable option today.
So
part of what changed, Pete, I think, was the Mario Cuban crisis. That changed a lot of immigration. I think that ended up leading to some changes because what the 11th Circuit opinion actually said was they can hold them there for the rest of their lives without a hearing, and there's nothing anybody can do. And that's what my judge was. That's what he was responding to.
In 1980,
83. Yeah.
Yeah, but on this case,
yes,
that is
I don't
not.
think that's true anymore. I think they changed the laws to change that. And doesn't matter though, Pete. The point of that story is the law doesn't matter here. We have a person who is legally in America who has been kidnapped by his government and sent to a torture prison.
Whether it is a district court. And the next one up would be the Court of Appeals, the circuit courts, or the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Those are all courts that can decide what in this case, the executive branch or the federal government has to do or can't do. And they have violated decisions that have come from all those courts, it would seem, right? Okay.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I told you on the last episode, I think, that we did together, or maybe I said in Vegas or before that, this is everyone know. We all know this is coming. Now, there'll come a moment, Pete. There'll come a moment where Trump has to decide, am I going to violate the order and say it to the world, or am I not? He hasn't done that yet. What he said so far is he's basically said, I'm going to follow the law. They're not following the law. But that's different than saying, I hear you. I hear what you're telling me. I'm not complying. If that happens, and I think it will, then we're at a constitutional crisis.
But you don't think we're already there? That they've already defied the...
To my knowledge, no federal official has said to the court system. Actually, Trump said yesterday, I will abide by the Supreme Court. That's what he said. He's still saying that. Now, when they disappoint him the first time, if they ever fucking disappoint him for the first time, this new term, if they disappoint him enough, the question will be, does he say, I'm complying, but don't comply in private?
I'm confused. Why is he not currently doing that? I feel like there's a lot of con law scholars saying that's exactly what we saw. We are through the Rubicon. He has defied a court order.
Right. Because you're missing the distinction, and I know you don't think it's important, but trust me,
I don't know.
You're missing the distinction between I'm going to follow the law, Your Honor, and then not doing it, which happens almost every day in America. And I understand your order. I understand what you're ordering me to do. I'm not doing it, which is, by the way, effectively what a couple presidents have. Lincoln kind of did that during the Civil War, but that was the Civil War. When Nixon was ordered to release his tapes, a couple of his advisors let slip to the press, he may follow a decision, he may not. We're not sure. But he did, of course. Nixon did, of course, follow. Right. Nixon would. So you're missing the significance between, okay, and they're not doing it, and I'm not doing it, even though I know I'm even though you have no authority to make me do this. I think that's coming, and that's the moment of crisis right there.
That's quite a hair to split, but okay.
Well, Pete, in our history, so there are still prayers in school all over the South. It's been unconstitutional since 1960.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, you could probably make a long.
By the way, to be politically neutral on this, in 2003, the Supreme Court issued a very strong opinion on affirmative action, 2 of them, that set forth the conditions under which affirmative action is legal. Nobody followed that. Nobody until recently. So disobeying the Supreme Court happens all the time. The South disobeyed the Supreme Court for decades, Pete, decades on segregation. But they didn't. And when the governor of Arkansas announced it in 1957, when he said, I'm not following Brown, that's when the court, for the first time in American history, in a case called Cooper versus Aaron, said, you must follow Brown because we are the ultimate authority of what the Constitution means. The first time the court ever said that was 1958, 57. Yes, people don't know that either. In 1943, there was a debate about who has the final say. The Supreme Court said it did in 1957.
This is fascinating because of the history of it all, which is one of the reasons I love talking with you. Obviously, your understanding and interpretation of the law, but just the historical references and the fact that they're right there at the top of the head makes you such a great teacher, scholar at your law school, and obviously guest on a podcast. So I appreciate you for all that I learned and relearned because I don't retain shit.
Me neither anymore at 66.
I never did. Thank you very much. I'll let you go. Have a good night. We appreciate you. We love you. And we're thinking of you and your family all the time. Don't get arrested.
Back at you, man. Thank you.
All right. There he goes. Eric Segall. How about it? Hopefully you liked that one. Appreciated it. Let him know. Go follow him on all the social media, particularly Blue Sky. I think is where he's posting way too much about golf today. The Masters is rough. But I love him. Love him. Love all the rest. That's for damn sure. And I am so grateful whenever he joins us, as he did out in Vegas. Such a good, classy, good friend. Love him. All right. That's it. That's all I've got for you. Hopefully you appreciated it. This show probably took, I don't know how many hours to produce. So I cannot thank you enough for supporting it, for listening to it, for telling your friends about it. And hopefully we're going to get way bigger now that I'm going to expand onto Substack and YouTube. It's going to be, I'm going to start doing angry rants from my car. I think that's the secret. No, I love it. I love what we're doing, and I can't do it without you, so I am so grateful to you. And I can't do it without John Carroll, who brings us in and out every single day. Go buy his new album, johncarroll.org, right now. Go get it. That's all I've got for you. Be the change you want to see in the world. Find the joy. Take your breaks. Find your spots. And remember what good old Ram Dass says. Whether this is the first day of the apocalypse or the first day of the golden age, the work remains the same. Love each other and ease as much suffering as possible. Let's try to do that today.
off of your butt, down off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience.